So how would you compare between, let's say, 2013 and 14 and what the media landscape looked like, how you felt like, what your ideas were, hopes and fears were at the time, and how you look at it now? Let's start, Samar.
Um, I think things are far more, much darker right now. And I hate to start with a negative attitude to this entire issue, but it is a fact. I think the one thing about financing independent media and sustainability is actually the elephant in the room, which is the fact that independent media are under independent media that are independent of the government are under unprecedented attack in India. There is the threat of punitive action and the proverbial knock on the door is always hanging over our heads. And for that reason, this is a far more difficult enterprise to run, simply because there are very few people who want to invest in what you're doing. It will take a very brave, and I don't blame them, it will take a very brave investor to invest in what, for example, something like we do. Even something as simple as subscription. So people say, so what is your model? So I said, well, we have a few contracts and we have subscription. Now subscriptions have actually been falling. We began 4 years ago and they've actually been falling. And one major reason for that is people are simply afraid. There are many people whom we know. When you do subscription, there is always a category called family and friends who always subscribe. That lot has fallen off a lot because a lot of family and friends who are very close who say, we want to give you money, but we're very scared to because we don't want our name to appear in the subscription list. So this is an essential, basic problem of independent media that are antagonistic to the government and not obviously antagonistic. It is just that the government perceives it as antagonism because we live in a time when any independent media that reports freely and without favor is considered antagonistic. So that I think is the biggest and basic difference that we have seen from say 2014, 15, even 16 to now. And things in the last 2-3 years have become much tougher.
And so, Samar does English language, he speaks to a certain audience. You publish in Kannada. Is it more challenging, less challenging? Because one of the big things that digital media is supposed to do is really allow independence at the regional media level, right? Allow anybody who had access to the internet could start something. How do you feel?
Well, the problem with me is I've never been pessimistic about anything. So that's the problem. But of course, if you look at the sustainability of the media, we are surviving not because of the revenue that we get from our media house per se, but in our model itself, there is a sort of assessing the public opinion by way of opinion polls and surveys. And I was also introduced as one who represents a media house which conducted opinion polls before 2023 elections. That is how we are surviving. I don't think that just with whatever ethical money that you can get through subscription and other things that you can survive. If the question is only about the survival as far as the finances are concerned. But I think there's one more angle to it. That is, when we say digital media, people are confused whether social media is part of that or not. If you start the digital media from the days of, say, Orkut or WordPress blogs, we have come a long way after that. So the social media is something which is also a threat to digital media, which is not social media platform. If you do not properly involve the communities whom you are catering to. There are any number of people who are running their Twitter handles as a small media houses. So how is it that we are different from them? And Twitter is out there for everybody to read freely. So when that is the case, I think associating with a lot of communities with whom you are addressing, if you do not do that, I think digital media, which is not social media, will face a lot of challenges. So Eedina is one platform where from the very beginning we are associated with many communities, and those communities have started this media house. Karnataka Farmers Movement, Dalit Movement, Landless Laborers Movement, and some left organizations have come together to form this media house. That is how we are surviving. Without that, probably we wouldn't have started this at all in Kannada. Kannada has a limited readership.
So that's interesting. Now, I'm going to come back to you at the end because she's the investor, the funder. Now, Vignesh is, News Minute is, anyone looks at News Minute and says, wow, rock star, man. Like, it's been such a huge success. You've achieved the most, enviable thing, which is scale and maintain independence. And so, how do you feel? Are you like, yes, I'm still nursing my champagne bottle, or are you also, do you share a lot of those concerns?
No, I definitely share all the concerns that they've said, but because there are students here, I'm not going to paint a very gloomy picture. See, in 2014 when we started, yes, a lot of hopes, a lot of dreams, aspirations, that the money will keep coming, we will do good stories and stuff like that. We've had good times, we've had bad times as well. Pretty much you asked me, right, what has changed between 2014 and 2024? I think every independent publication in the country has been raided. Once, if not, more than that. We've had numerous IT notices and stuff like that, but we break through that. But what I'm proud of, in 2024 is when I look at my team and I look at the organization that we've built, is ultimately it has only been the independent publications which have done some kind of justice to the profession of journalism. Right? Nobody else has. I think pretty much all the awards which, the reputed awards which have been given out have always been to the independent publications. That way the legacy and larger media and stuff like that have pretty much not been the fourth pillar of democracy. So I definitely believe going forward, there is hope. You just cannot build a massive media empire. That is probably not possible unless you're doing, some kind of tech innovation and stuff like that. But we have to make sure that going forward we are able to penetrate into the tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, and there's a lot of room over there where we feel that many journalistic operations are not being able to, and that's also maybe a funding thing and stuff like that. I mean, if you ask me today, my plan for the last 5 years has been that we should have, we only focus in the south. We should be having a couple, A&M which is going to be there in all 5 languages, four languages in the south and representing all the 5 southern states. So we still, I believe, have a long way to go to achieve whatever we wanted to or we set out to achieve. So as students over here, you all should look at journalism as a profession. You all should come and join organizations like...
What about funding?
I thought funding was the second one.
So do you think like the funding, landscape has changed, become more challenging?
Okay,
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is disagreeing about the quality of
in the last 10 years, we've raised money from 4 different people. So I don't think it's not there. It's just that it's a little bit more harder to reach out to these people and convince them and then, bring them on board. No offense, but I've not had any luck with VCs. Yes, they want an option of scale or some kind of tech innovation and stuff like that. Ultimately, we are an organization of about 50 people. We have reporters on the ground who come and write fantastic stories. They actually bring out what is happening on the ground and stuff like that. I don't think any AI tool, any kind of innovation can actually replace that. Like Samar said, there is some amount of fear that if at all we go and reach out and then they actually want to fund an organization like us, ultimately if something happens, if we get raided or the income tax department comes or whatever happens, will my name get pulled inside, right? But we've met about 30 people in this one full year, and we were able to have a success rate of about 2 people who are actually interested in funding. So I don't think the 30 to 2 and 2 is to 30 is not such a bad ratio. But like I said, we cannot be an organization which gives 20x or 30x and 40x. But we are organizations which are trying to do the right thing. And I think that itself warrants some kind of investment.
Okay, yeah. So now, Kavya, Um, so you are actually on the venture side of things, right? And yes, I think the two things which are standard, which are a problem, and I say that as a founder, venture capital in the three issues I would say in terms of funding. And if you talk to founders, is their problem. Is one is, if you're independent, is this obsession with scale. And in India, the notion of scale is crazy. What is good enough for a funder in New York, right, is not good enough here because, we have 1.4 billion, it should be like 500 million people that you're going to reach. Where are your numbers? Where's your ambition? I've heard that so many times, right? The second is obviously there's a sense of, media is not a good financial bet anyway, scale or no scale, because there are too many risks involved. Political risks, and yeah, political risks really. So, and then of course the third is like not understanding. I mean, how many funds are there that actually even understand media as an industry, understand media as, come with that deep sense of what's valuable, what can grow, if it's funded properly, if you fund it in this way. Because a lot of talk from venture funds is, we're your partners, we're with you on this journey, right? Well, I mean, there are not a lot of venture partners, are there? So, I hate to. So, those are the general sense about like the struggle and the pain when it comes to venture funding. It's not your fault or your problem, but as someone who understands the community and understands that landscape. So, maybe you could explain some of that.
Yeah, so first of all, I feel compelled to say that I'm one of you. I started off as an engineer, but then switched to journalism. I was a journalist for close to 10 years. So when I moved here, the whole intent was to get money into media. Right? So I'm hoping to build a portfolio in media and tech with a focus on media, so kind of moving towards the civic tech side of things at Lightrock. So the kind of disillusionment that I've had to go through is a lot to do with the flip side of the political spectrum that you're talking about, right? It's the FCRA regulations. We are a foreign fund. There is not many companies here that we can invest in, without exposing both the company as well as the fund itself. There is a lot more in terms of the ethics of, when you ours is a sovereign fund.
Do you want to just quickly explain FCRA for people who don't?
FCRA is there is a restriction on how much foreign fund can go into certain sectors, like the media. I mean, at the very base of it. And if you do take foreign funding, you have to do a lot of paperwork to be able to be compliant, and that does expose you to a lot more of. Even if you are by the paper, there is a lot of things that you could get audited for, and a lot of time and money could be wasted on getting things in order. Right? So there are, and news agencies, news outlets aren't really, they are really strapped for time because everything is working at the absolute minimum possible workforce, right? And you don't really have time to try to be compliant with a whole bunch of laws. So there are people that are hesitant to take the money on one side. Right? The funds are hesitant to put in the money because it exposes the fund as well. And on top of all that, there is everything that you said about the political sensitivity of things, right? So we are a sovereign fund at Lightrock, which means that it would be, if we were to put in money, it would essentially be the king of one country telling what the truth in India is. And there is an ethical consideration there to be taken into account. And so there are a lot of both political as well as ethical complications that I've learned over the last couple of years of trying to build a media portfolio. But the flip side of it is that we are continuing to work on it. There are still VCs who are truly interested in media for the sake of media, right? And not companies which are forced to do journalism as a side hustle to make to have something else fund your journalism.
Right, which is what a lot of media organizations are doing, at least in the West. They're finding out things that they can do. They're bundling, so you make money from doing something else, so that you can do journalism, and that's what Splainer's going to do next. Actually, do shopping, but that's besides the point, because people are more likely. So that's what I want to get into next. One of the big things is funding. But the other thing is also your audience, right? And I want to talk about audience, and you can jump in any angle on that question of audience, because I think everyone has really interesting, complex, rich answers. So I don't want to frame the question in a way that's very narrow. So you can talk about audience in terms of niche. So do you feel the way to be successful? Niche is a dirty word in the venture capital world, especially in India. But niche may also be the future of journalism. Getting your, small set of very dedicated, very loyal, very engaged, audience. Whether you define small as, 10,000 people, or you define small as 500,000 people, right? But finding that niche, is that the way forward for independent media, right? The second thing is, and it's kind of part B, how do you find that niche or that very, very engaged audience that really cares at a time when all global data shows that people are turning away from news? People are actively avoiding news at least some of the time, and these are hardcore news consumers, especially when you get younger, below like 35, I think it was below 35, it's sort of almost 40% are saying that mood, brings their mood down. News brings their mood down. Sort of, you have a product that people don't even like to consume. And the problem is that the world is getting more and more difficult. So the chances that there'll be some kumbaya happy news are lower and lower. So, you want a niche, you want this very engaged audience, but that pool seems to be shrinking. How do you deal with that idea? Or is that not a challenge that you've encountered?
I think there's no, unless you're running a Times of India, I think the future for the media in India, in a country like India, is, as you call it, niche. But I wouldn't call it exactly niche. I think it has more to do with what your interests, where your interests lie, and what your passion is. And that is what you should pursue if you are setting up an independent media house, because there are a lot of people out there who are like you, and they may not be in the millions, but they may certainly be in the hundreds of thousands. And finding those people, finding that audience, I think is the most important thing. And that is what then will sustain you. The media have never, as you noted, and as I think all of you know, the media have never been a profit center. The media cost center. There is, especially in a country like India, nobody wants to pay for anything related to the news. Everyone wants it free. So it has to be subsidized. And that has always been the way actually from the start. I remember, who was it? I think Jawaharlal Nehru called the major newspapers, he called it the jute press in the 1950s. Meaning referring to all the major newspapers from the Telegraph to the Times of India, who were run by the Jains, the Birlas, the Goenkas, whoever. Now, of course, you could call it the petrochemical and mining press, because that appears to have happened. So then that is fine. And that is in the nature of the media. The same thing is happening in the West. Where there are now these conglomerates who have no connection to journalism, who are now actually owning the large media. And of course, as you know, in the place like the US, the community newspapers, the kind of role, for example, say that like Eedina perform, have disappeared entirely. They don't exist any longer. When I did my master's in the US in the early 90s, every town had this little newspaper, which was fully connected with the media. It's completely gone. And I think that is one of the reasons why the US is now so susceptible to this spate of fake news that comes out from this disembodied, distant websites, etc. There, because the people they trust are gone. So I think a lot of people, a lot of readers are looking for something they trust. And I think that is the opportunity that exists for the independent media in India today.
Yeah, if we are not speaking about the costs involved, finances involved, then is it true that people have stopped reading news? Maybe the problems of English media and language media may be different. For example, in Karnataka, there are big communities who feel that they do not have a media of their own. This was actually quite evident when we went to different districts and taluks where we held meetings with communities. They were furious about whatever is happening now, particularly Dalit community, because it was exactly at that point of time when an important incident in Karnataka happened. A district judge removed Ambedkar's photo from the district court premises, and there was a huge, massive protest in Bangalore, and none of the media covered it. So they felt that it is because the media does not belong to us, they have not covered us. So on November 30th, there was a readers' conference which Eedina organized. More than 1,000 people came on their own, and 30 to 40% of them were from Dalit community. So they want their news to be published. So there are people who want to read news which matters to them, which covers their stories. So in that sense, I think there are different worlds. India is not a single world. Yes. So this is what I feel, and sometimes we take positions on most of such things, and I'm surprised to hear things even here in the morning when journalists think that there is a neutral journalist world that exists. In Karnataka, in 2 murder charge sheets, journalists or news media has been named in murder charge sheets, and none other than Gauri Lankesh and Kalburgi's murder charge sheet, because news media was directly or indirectly involved in those murders, at least in bringing that indoctrination into the killers. So when that is the case, you think that you live in a neutral space and you should take positions. And I feel surprised about such things. And you take positions in favor of the oppressed communities who are there, who want their news to be covered. Then you have a very big audience even. And maybe English media has this problem because it cannot cater to a very big population.
So this is interesting to me, going back to what you were saying, where you said there's so much for news minutes still to do. When you're talking about tier 2, tier 3, is this sort of, does it dovetail into what Vasu is saying?
So I'll speak from the audience and the niche as well. I mean, if you ask me, and the News Minute, obviously we don't want to be a niche website. We want to be a website which is read by millions of people, just like the TOIs and your Hindustan Times and stuff like that. Unfortunately, we don't have the money or the resources. Okay. And then we have another bigger problem, which is basically you put it on the web and then you don't know what algorithms will play out and if your story will ever be discovered. Okay. And speaking for all of us here, we obviously want all our stories to be read by the maximum number of people that can read the story. But the other problem is when you work on something like that, then basically you're traditionally putting yourself into an advertising run model, which is common of the legacy or the larger publishers. So they publish anywhere between 500 to 2,000 copies a day, and then you're flooding the internet with unnecessary information, and then it's all ad run, right? I think building a niche website helps in identifying the people who will be engaged with you and ultimately will be the people who will pay for you. See, we've all created organizing, at least speaking from a news minister's perspective, we've done both sides. We've done the advertising side in the beginning up to 2021 and then flipped over to the reader revenue or the membership subscription side post that. So we've seen both the sides of the story, right? And I genuinely believe that going forward, any independent publication will not be able to function with an ad run model. And they will have to definitely move forward into a reader run or a subscription membership, whatever you call it. Right? I don't think they will be able to sustain anything like that. So that's where the niche plays out. Right? I mean, I would also like to be an organization which has millions of readers, and just like an NYT, probably having millions of subscribers as well. But due to the lack of money, funding, resources, whatever, I will not. So then what is the next best step? Focus on at least, like Vasu said, being a voice to the voiceless, right? Making sure that your stories can reach out to a certain set of people who matter. And also adding to that the number of people who are dropping off and not reading. I think, again, that's the audience which will not engage with you as highly as you want them to. And that will also not be the audience which is going to pay for you. I mean, there will be a drop off.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
you're saying, they're
Yeah.
nice to have, not
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
have.
We call them one-hit wonders. They come, they read, and then they exit. They'll never engage with you. They don't care. Would I like to be an organization which has an entertainment wing which drives a lot of traffic? I would love to. Sports wing, yes, we've never covered a sports story in our lives. But those are things that we would obviously like to integrate into the News Minute portfolio as such. So,
And
as
what,
of now, we will be niche. So,
but what about the thing is, like when you're thinking about expanding into these new geographies, also these new audiences who, as Vasi says, are invisible and not being represented. Is that sort of a way forward as well? Because that's not just niche; that's also broadening.
see, I think with the stories that we've been doing, I think we've already got that audience. At least I think that's what we would like to believe. That's the audience that we are catering to, right? I mean, if you're talking about the Dalit community, then we've made sure that that is the audience that we've got. We represent, or not represent, we write about the issues which happen in the South. And to a vast majority, if you look at our traffic, the numbers come from the South at the end of the day, right? And it all depends on what is the kind of story that we're publishing and what is the kind of audience that you get for that this one. But as of now, even though the numbers are going down, it's regularizing to be the number of people who actually will engage with us or our content. Now our focus is not about going into the ocean and saying that, oh, you know what, we'll throw a fish net and then catch as many fish as we want. We're not doing that anymore. We're going into the ocean. We know who our audience is. We know that's the person that has to be engaged with us. That's probably the person who's going to be paying us in the future, right? And then we try to make sure that we get those people as our engaged audience, right? So in that way, we're a little bit of a niche. We are not a mass producing website as such, but a site which will be able to get a smaller number of people, but who will actually be engaged, and not only engaged, but also stick around with you in the long run. So.
Okay, so that's really interesting, and I think this is beyond India, right? Everywhere there's a financial crisis, there's a business revenue model around the globe for media. I don't care whether it's the richest countries, the poorest countries, or however diverse. Like when it comes to sort of building large audiences, monetizing those audiences, it's a struggle. Because it's not just a struggle because of algorithms. When Zuckerberg says, "Oh, I don't care about news anymore," that means that's it. There are like millions of people who won't see your content anymore. So, the way forward, as Samar and Vasu and Vignesh is saying, people have found their own solutions, and they primarily are about finding smaller but more engaged, more passionate audiences who are willing to invest in you and willing to support you. The venture mindset around the world is scale. This is not a venture business. That's what you get. So is media never going to be a venture business? And let's not even talk about the New York Times. The bloody New York Times is making money from cooking and like boredom. They're not even making money from their news. I'm sorry. Their subscriptions were falling. And in the end, the primary reason people actually pay for New York Times has to do with lots of other things that have nothing to do with its news, right? So even New York Times has had to say, I want scale. And actually, people have found that either you're going to do all these other things that are not news, that's one model, New York Times model, or you find your 1,000 true fans or some version of that. So what does that mean about the relationship between venture and news?
So if you look at, to go back to your original point, Vasu's original point of like, what is social media and what is media, right? That is one of the lines that have really blurred pre-2014 to now, right? Because we wouldn't have thought of YouTube and WhatsApp as places where people found their news. They were meant to be distribution channels, not the channels themselves, not the medium themselves. So there has been a significant muddling of like what is content creation and what is content distribution. So that the reason I'm talking about that is because if you look at the last 2 years of funding, a significant amount of the money went into, for media funding, went into what you might call the digital platforms or the news aggregators, or the digital platforms or the social media kind of, right? But it gets bundled under media. So when the VCs put the numbers out of this is the money they put into media, it's largely the social media numbers that's going to stand out. If you dig further into that, you see like about 100 million went into, in the last 2 years, 100 million globally went into what's called news aggregators, and about 100 million went into general news platforms, right? And 100 million is nothing in the VC landscape. It's basically pocket change in the VC landscape, unfortunately. Not the same for most media outlets, but and what's really been growing is, to your niche question, is single topic publications. Sports has grown by nearly 300%. And it's gotten about 300 million just sports. Fashion and tech has got a significant amount of business and finance. Like again, right, Newsprint, I feel like is an exception that you are a general news website and still have been able to have the numbers that you have. Right, you are almost at like 2.5x to 3x your EV to your revenue, if you look at the numbers. So that is incredible, and that's kind of something signature to Indian media in a lot of ways. You're looking at 25x, 26x valuation to revenue in the West, whereas we are in India, we are happy if we get to 2x, 2 to 3x is what we're looking at. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a completely different market, even though the challenges are the same. And to the part of the scale, right? So, yeah, we are looking at niche. The niche is where people are willing to pay, niche or single topic or however you want to call it, right? So there has to be a editorial voice that is different, because if you're going to find the same news out there without paying, why would anyone pay for it? And there is an upper cap to what people are willing to pay. The catch-22 though is, the moment you want to scale with the niche, you start diluting your niche and you're no longer the niche. So you can't scale and still be the niche. And that is the problem that that is keeping VCs away from, which is what makes media a unfundable business under most VC terms. But there is an ever-growing population of what people, for a lot of, to be very honest, it's a greenwashing term called impact venture capital. But there are still VCs who are not looking for a 10x to 25x growth. Right? They are okay with, because the MOICs on other investments can make up for it. There are impact investments that people are willing to make on journalism. People have earmarked money for it, if only the business and the political climate allows us to do that.
Okay, so that actually kind of like, this is the last, like, sort of looking forward, and it's part of the looking forward question. All of us have talked about the struggles of doing news and, monetizing news, and yet you have the Dhruv Rathis and the Deshbhakt, so you have a whole new kind of doing news. I think you touched upon that, or Joe Rogan. People don't see, when people are consuming, don't see the difference between someone with a YouTube channel telling them what's going on with either like a murder investigation or with land fraud, and some of it might be really good too. I mean, I'm not saying that we should this as like lesser, or maybe you think it's lesser. I'm not sure. I'm just saying it's not built into the question. I'm just saying now you have people who can actually, so the news that people are paying attention to, that came out like I think 2 weeks ago, is, are influencers, newsfluencers, I think they're called. People who are on YouTube or Twitter or, TikTok, talking about news, lots of times in depth. Um, Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's complete bullshit, but definitely built around personalities. So that's a new kind of news, and people, especially the younger generation, seem to be more interested in that kind of format of delivering news to them than what we all have always traditionally done. So how do you see sort of that fitting into the future and where you think where you might be going, or publications like you?
Underlying all these influences is journalism. For example, if you listen to whoever it is, Ravish or Dhruv Rathi, where are they getting the information from? And Ravish is very upfront. He says that this is where I got this information from. This is what these guys are doing. I know this because he mentions us very often, and he mentions a lot of other journalists as well. So all of them, the credible ones, I think, depend on journalism. And it's just that the model has changed. Normally, you would have to have a big television channel with an anchor there being supplied by the journalists they're paid for by the company. Here, you're getting supplied by ill-paid independent journalists who are still doing the same job, but at a fraction of what we used to get. But still supplying to this one
Not
person.
getting paid, no?
Who is not?
I think the independent journalists who
No.
Yeah.
Of course not. So that's how it's evolved. So I mean that is how it has evolved. So and that's why we all where we are, and that's why we're having the discussion as to where is journalism evolved, how is it evolving. This is how it is evolving. And the thing is, I do not think, I'm not a believer in any of those who say that journalism is dead or is dying or you can do without it. You cannot, because for all of this, whether this is delivered to you by influencers or other YouTube channels, there is still journalism is the undergird of all this. And I think in India more people get their news from YouTube than anywhere else, which surprised me so much when I first saw it. And how much is it? I think 70% or something, especially in the north, get from them. But does this mean that people, especially young people, are less aware? They are not less aware. And I think an ideal example of that was this general election just before that. I used to keep seeing like everyone else, I also watch a lot of these videos, also cat and dog videos. But apart from that, these serious videos. So many of these videos, I was struck most by these videos of these really young, really articulate people who would be, there would be an anchor who would have a mic in front of them, and they would give this fantastic disposition on the state of Indian politics or Indian economy or the local politics or local economy. I can speak only for 3 languages that I heard them in, and they were fantastic, some of them. Some of the best came from some of the least educated parts of the country, Bihar, UP, etc. They're so fabulously articulate young women and men who could just carry on, and I was struck because I said I would not be able to articulate the disparate facts and figures, and all valid facts and figures from everywhere. I heard quite a few in Marathi also, in little towns in Maharashtra, and I heard some in Karnataka. Not as much, but I did hear some from Karnataka as well. Again, in small towns, not so much in the larger cities, but from the smaller towns. Again, very articulate young people. Or these are the people who we thought do not any longer subscribe to journalism. They do subscribe to journalism, just not in the way that we, of dinosaurs like us, from the 50s and 60s, 50-year-old or 60-year-old. I don't know how old I'm just speaking for myself. That we regard journalism. They regard it very differently. And it comes to them like osmosis. It comes down from what they're watching, then somebody says something, there's some facts and figures presented, and very often they put it together and put it out in a way that I, could not possibly do. So I have a lot of hope.
How does that fit when moving forward? Like, how do you think eventually these, Ravi should be paying Article 14 for doing journalism that he puts out? I mean, I'm not taking names. Let's not take names.
Yeah, no, I think...
But if Dhruv Rathi uses blah blah blah, like for example, there's so many. All these news organizations are suing OpenAI, etc., saying you're using our research, the machine uses our research, and then spits out answers. In some way, what you're describing is what's happening with YouTube influencers. They're using research being done by, other people and then pulling it together in a way
I
that's
understand what
compelling.
you're saying, and it's a very good point. I'm glad you raised that point because I think this makes no sense whatsoever. Pursuing all these people and trying to make them pay up. That is not the future of journalism. The future of journalism, unfortunately, in the pure sense, is going to be free. So this whole question of trying to persuade someone, and Europe does it. European regulators spend so much time over this. American regulators, Australian regulators, of course, we have seen are forcing everyone to try to pay. But this is a losing battle. This is not going to happen because this is not how technology is evolving. This is not how, according to me, the internet is evolving. You are not going to be able to segregate and say, okay, I produce that content, you will pay me for just that. That's going to be very difficult to do. So it is up to people who run companies like us to figure out how we are going to make that money. Some part of it certainly will come from what everyone was saying, from the communities that you cater to. But other than that, we have to figure out how it's going to be done. It is fun, it's challenging, it's not easy, but I think it's fun. For example, I was just telling Vignesh that my main source of income does not come from Article 14. Until recently, for the last 4-5 years, my main source of income has been from a cooking column that I write. Article 14 does not pay me. We have one full-time employee, and that's not me. So we are cut to the bone. We don't have offices, we don't have HR. All our money that we get goes towards paying the reporters and we have sustained ourselves. I don't know how long we will, but we have managed to sustain ourselves, and I'm sure something will come up. So the challenge is finding that something, and it's different for everyone. But there are opportunities out there, and we have to find other things to subsidize our journalism. The challenge is to find that and to pursue that.
So with Vasu, I'm going to ask you, actually, is this, because after all, traditional journalism is elitist. You have to, write in a particular way, blah, 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 blah. So does this form of journalism, which is storytelling, like you said, through osmosis done very well, a real opportunity to those communities who are not being represented to not even depend on, some other publication. They can represent themselves by speaking about, the ways they see a world, or they see, creating their own news.
Well, I'm not sure about journalism, but traditional journalists are elite. Sorry to say it. No, basically, because I think when I say there are a very big number of people whose news is not covered, and they are already expressing it. They are expressing it in a very non-elite way in their own social media platforms. So can we give a platform to them, because Facebook may not give it, or Facebook may not have that kind of credibility also sometimes. So if we have a platform which is credible to some extent and you are carrying that news, this is what we have seen in the last 2.5 years. And our next revenue experiment is on this, that since we are catering to those people and they are reading our news and they cannot pay much, so can the subscription fee be as low as 25 rupees per month? And can we scale it up to say 1 lakh subscribers in the next 3 or 4 years? This is what we want to try. Of course, this was there since from the very beginning. We wanted to start with big funding and sustain it for 2, 3, 4 years with solidarity money and maintain it in the long run with this small subscription. The first one failed because no big funder came to fund us. Those who had promised us, they suffered badly during COVID second wave. So we had to raise funds maybe by raising loans and also by selling some properties. But the second phase was quite difficult, but the surveys that we conducted sustained us. But now we want to move toward this 25 rupees per month subscription. Because people whose news we are covering, they can pay only that much. But can we scale it up is the question. This is where some people differ, in our team differ, that yes, there will be people who will be paying, but we may not be able to scale it up. So we do not know. Well, this is what we are trying to do. And when Samar said there's only one full-time employee, I was taken aback. We have employed more than 50 people. And they are doing great work. And Mrs. Dania also sometimes probably late at 11. that news ministry is doing fantastic job, and we have to learn a lot of things from them. It is not that we are doing some great things. We, as far as the core journalism things are concerned, people like them, they are doing great work. But we are trying to connect with the communities in Kannada.
Yes. Okay, and Kavya, I'm going to ask you. I'll just ask Vignesh, and it's kind of a fun question. So, if you can't beat him, join him. So, are you going to turn Dhanya into the next, sort of superstar YouTube?
Don't have to turn. No, it's already been done. No? And I've said
Is
this.
she? Yeah, Dhanya, come on, man.
I've said this. I've said this many times. If tomorrow any apparel Levi's brand comes and says that, hey, we will pay 1 month's of salary for all the employees of TNM, but she has to model.
Oh, there you go.
She can go ahead and do it as well. So.
No, because I think that's a great model, because the reason I say it is that for the longest time, journalists have said you can't become a brand. It shouldn't be about you. But actually, now it is great for it to be about you. For you to have a face like Dhanya that people like and relate to, who can be out there and sort of promoting News Minute in a way that is, it becomes a natural extension of News Minute rather than something that you have to artificially replicate.
So from the very beginning, obviously Dhanya was the brand because she's also the co-founder as well. But we've always made sure that the people who came below would always have their own individual identities and build their own brand. So we have many people right now. Shabir has his own set of followers in Tamil Nadu, and then Pooja is there, and Sudipta is there. So that's always been the model at the News Minute. Every individual reporter who's out there goes out and builds their own brand. We had Prajwal for the longest time, but he left. He's going to study in the US. But that's something that we will always continue. So that I don't think that will change. So Dhanya will be the biggest brand, but we'll try to build some mini Dhanyas as well.
Then it's not even smiling, man. Then it's like, whatever.
So
bigger.
just
It's
to
such a
answer-
boys' club. We need a girl now.
Just to answer Samar's question, that when Ravish takes your content and then shares it out on YouTube platforms,
Right.
I'd be very happy if Ravish takes our stories and shares it, because the kind of marketing that you get and the number of people,
Sure.
the footfall which you get onto the website is just incredible.
So that's great. You get conversion. Typically, you don't. But anyway, so there's a fantastic conversation. I think we could just carry on and on forever. But I'm going to bring it to an end. We have time for questions, or are we done? I think we're done, right? Okay. Maybe one question. Yeah?
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Rehan. I'm doing my second year Masters in Advertising and Public Relations. So my question is open to the panel, anybody can answer it. So credibility, something that it's worth its weight in gold for journalists. It's kind of for sale in the age of like journalism 2.0, web journalism, where anybody with a phone and internet connection can become a journalist. So someone with a blue tick or who's verified can get more traction than a genuine media house. And their story reaches out to more people than somebody who's doing the grunt work and the hard work, fact checking would ever get. So, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, like where credibility is equated with reach. So you don't reach a lot of people, you're not as credible as the person who can reach a lot of people. So Joe Rogan has more credibility than, I don't know, whoever else. I mean, you think that's a problem?
I don't think this is something new, right? I mean, social media has been there for quite some time, and this is the problem that we see all the time. That when our stories are not read as much as what other people, like so-called verified people on Twitter, I think some kind of regulations. I mean, that's exactly what the governments are saying, right? We want to do some kind of fact checking and stuff for them. Now, whether the fact checking applies to them or not is something. I mean, I'm against government fact checking things, but I don't know if there's any solution to that. Okay. I mean, I can't. Yeah. I mean, I know what you're saying, but I don't know what kind of solution is there for that. It's not like that.
most of the videos which have gone viral are not of even these influencers, but of a village girl who has spoken to a chief minister about the onion price which is falling, right? So you shouldn't worry about these things. In fact, if we can be a platform to those people who are saying truth, and if we can collaborate with them, that's the real model. That is what I think.
I think there are, to your earlier saying, there are two things. There's influence and there's credibility. Right? Reach is more influence than credibility. When it starts becoming the same thing is because what you believe is your social capital. You don't want to be somebody who believes something different from all your group of friends. Right? So that's when the influence becomes credibility at some point. So I think really the only way to break that is with the public and not with the news media outlets itself, is to be able to not give into that need for the social capital to be conformant. I mean, I know it's a huge ask, and it's a throwing it out into the world there, but that I feel like is the only way, and there isn't much that the news outlets, which are at the mercy of these algorithms, can actually do to control this.
Choose your news media wisely.
Yes.
That's the solution.
Thank you so much. You're going to end it on that. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to all of our